In its opening moments, Suikoden II plunges you into a war-torn world where childhood friendships are shattered and impossible choices must be made. Underscored by Miki Higashino's masterful soundtrack, it promises a journey filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and a desperate struggle for peace. This isn't just another retro RPG. It's a deeply personal tale about the cost of conflict and the tragic paths we walk in the name of power. Suikoden II's emotional weight and unforgettable characters have cemented its place in the rich history of the PlayStation library. And today, we're going to dive into what makes this classic resonate so deeply, even after 26 years. If you have not seen our video from last week, there's a lot of things that Suikoden 1 does that are almost entirely lifted and carried over into Suikoden 2. The battle system is almost identical. The base building / collecting of the 108 Stars of Destiny, the 108 characters, almost identical. So we won't be retreading a lot of those points. In this video, we're going to concentrate more on things that are different between the two and the story, which was far and away more ambitious this time around than in the first game.
The second game is amazing. It's wonderful. The first game is also very, very good, but there were a few points where I was noticing some shortcomings and I wasn't always completely into it. The second game really shores up a lot of the apprehensions I had from the first game, and it delivers a much more polished experience, I think. However, that being said, I don't know that I would have enjoyed Suikoden 2 on its own as much without having played Suikoden 1 first.
I agree with that.
I think there's a reason why these two games are sold as a package, and not just because the stories have some overlap, but also because I think the experience of one helps to bolster your experience of the other. And so having played Suikoden 1 and then moving into Suikoden 2, it became very exciting for me to hear about the things in my previous playthrough. Even the specific things like the names that I got to choose in Suikoden 1 are carried over in some form into Suikoden 2, and that's very exciting. It was really fun for me. I'd say in most ways Suikoden 2 improved on Suikoden 1, 80% or so. But there are a few things that I think Suikoden 1 actually did better. One of them is actually the castle. I love improving the castle in Suikoden 2 a lot, but it's a little more complicated. It's big right off the bat, whereas Suikoden 1, things were a little bit tighter together. The characters were a little bit more huddled. You know, a lot of the stores and shops and places I needed to go to often were really close together, so I could hit them all at once. That's less the case here in Suikoden 2. Now, Suikoden 2 gives you more room to explore, which is nice, but I found myself neglecting to do that the way that I was excited to do that in 1. I still did it in Suikoden 2, but it became more time-consuming to do that, in which case I kind of stopped after a little while. And I was like, okay, I got a bunch of new characters. I don't know where they are in this labyrinth of a castle. I'm just going to assume they're somewhere here, and I'm just going to move on to the next objective, right? I found myself doing that a little bit more in Suikoden 2 than I did in Suikoden 1. And the other one, and this is a big one for me, it is the battles, the large-scale battles, the war scenes. At the beginning, I'd never really seen a game do quite what Suikoden 1 did with these large-scale 10,000 troop battles. But Suikoden 2 chose to go a way that I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's more of like a tactical RPG, and it's serviceable, but it's not as interesting. It's not as compelling in my mind as the first one.
I loved the idea behind it. I mean, conceptually, mixing your sort of typical save the world JRPG format with a Fire Emblem-esque style tactical RPG format. Conceptually, I love that idea.
I do too.
It's just not executed that well here. You're so limited in your ability to move.
Exactly.
You have like one space you can move with normal units and two, I think, with the cavalry units. That outmaneuvering is just out of the question. And the other part of it too is most of these battles are unlosable anyways.
I've kind of figured that, actually, especially after I thought I was losing and suddenly got a great streak of luck. So I was sweating it before I realized that I don't know that I can actually lose this. But it just took a long time. It's like a 15-minute battle.
Yes.
There is some strategy to it, like when to use the fire sticks. If you got 3 enemies in a row and you can get around there, you can like, boom, get them all at once. That's fun. when we say unlosable, of course, sometimes you are meant to lose. And
Right. Yes.
you retreat and all that
Exactly.
kind of stuff.
These battles are more vehicles for the storytelling than they are a challenge for the player in a format that looks similar to contemporary tactical RPGs of the time. And which is reliant on a specific outcome and is going to push you into that outcome no matter what you do.
But let me talk about another area where Suikoden II does very successfully execute on the concept, and that is the story. I mentioned in the Suikoden 1 review that sometimes the story wasn't the most compelling, and I found myself kind of tuning out a bit and just waiting to go back to the castle so that I can go explore all the new additions that have been made. Suikoden 2, that is not the case. In fact, it's almost kind of the opposite. I found myself overlooking the castle a little bit and really wanting to move the story forward. It's a compelling story. Everything about it works really well. I love the character relationships. They make sense to me. There's a lot of tragedy and a lot of comedy and a lot of just fun, just heroic adventurousness happening in this game that I love so much. But one of the ways in which the story differs here is kind of the approach to the villains. The villains are quite different, I think. The villain of Suikoden 2 is not the most round of villains,
definitely
right?
not.
He's pretty flat. There's some depth happening there, but he's pretty flat. Whereas I felt a little more roundness with the villains of Suikoden 1,
100%.
which may have improved Suikoden's story a little bit in that regard.
First, I want to comment on the villain here, Luca Blight.
Luca Blight. What a name, by the way.
Right. Really great name and a really great design for the character. He is as menacing as it gets for villains of this kind of game.
Yes. He's like a Kefka type.
He's like Kefka, but way more intimidating than Kefka.
Yeah.
You talked about the fact that he's a pretty flat character, not a round character, which is entirely true. And that was one of the things I loved about the first game, was that the generals and some of the villains that you fought were rounder characters, and I felt like it explored more complex morality in a simple way that kids could follow and understand.
I like that.
Here, I think, is another great example of the opposite kind of villain. A villain who is 100% evil, as evil as it gets.
There is no redemption, right? Like there is no, hey, come fight for our team now. Like that's not even possible.
He is totally irredeemable, completely psychotic, and as cruel as it gets, and is compelling within that format for a villain. It's two sides of the coin of ways to approach writing a villain.
Yeah.
And this is just as successful in its format as the others were in theirs.
I agree. Not every villain has to be round. It's more interesting to have a rounder character. But in general, a flat villain can still work extremely well if you can execute on the characters and the rest of the other story structures, you know, the storyline in general and the way that it plays out.
Yeah.
Of course, Lord of the Rings does it perfectly, I think.
And just speaking on the story generally, this game is far more ambitious in terms of the emotional depths that it's reaching for.
Yeah, I noticed.
I have always loved the format for a story where you have two friends torn apart in a wartime scenario or just on opposite philosophies or something like that.
Right.
Characters who were very, very close, were blood brothers, were together to the end, had this tight bond, and then through means kind of beyond their control, end up separated.
Yeah.
That kind of story has always been very compelling to me. Final Fantasy Tactics does this.
Oh, yes.
And I would say that Suikoden 2's is even better than that.
Ooh, that's crazy, because Tactics has a very compelling story in that regard.
Final Fantasy Tactics is more compelling with its political intrigue and its world building.
Yeah.
But Suikoden 2, I think, is more compelling in the ability to make me believe that those two characters were fast friends and how tragic it feels for them to have to go through what happens in the story and end up being separated. In that respect, Jowy and Riou, I think, are stronger characters that have a more emotional pull for me than Delita and Ramza in Final Fantasy Tactics. So now we do want to get into a little bit of spoiler territory, because you can't really talk about Suikoden 2 without talking about some of the particulars of the story that are just really hard-hitting. So if you haven't played the game, go play it. Come back and watch this part later. But we're going to talk about some spoiler stuff in the story, so just be warned about that. I want to talk about the intro because it's possibly my favorite part of the whole game. The intro scenario is so well executed in every respect. I love how there's no music. It's very quiet as you wake up in the camp and you just hear the noise of the crickets outside.
Yeah.
There's almost this unsettling quietness to it in a very similar way to what we talked about in Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the intro of that movie? They just have that little drum.
Yeah.
But otherwise...
And it's wind and the brush, just kind of the leaves.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a very similar feeling here. There's this ominous feeling to it, like something's coming, but you don't know quite what. And if you're talking to the NPCs in that area, one of them will say, hey, I think I saw some movement there in the forest. And if you try to run over the forest, a guy comes out and goes, oh, like he got
There's
seen.
like a shadow and he runs away. Yeah.
And there's just something is coming. You're in the quiet before the storm part.
The calm before the
storm. But you don't know why you feel that way. There's nothing really that indicates something absolutely horrible is going to happen.
Right. Well,
but something doesn't feel right.
You just started the game. You don't know what the general atmosphere of this game is. This could be it, for all you know. But still, it feels off.
Yes. Something feels off. And then you go to sleep, finally, and you wake up, and the whole brigade has just been massacred.
Yeah.
And this is a children's brigade. This is not like the main army of Highland. These are child soldiers who were basically there for a ceremonious kind of peace treaty signing.
Right.
And the Prince of Highland has set this up on purpose to perpetuate the war.
Yeah.
They were coming to a close on this war, and the prince does not want it to end. And so he massacres his own child brigade in order to blame it as a false flag on the city-states and then continue the war, create a justification to continue it. That's the kind of guy this is right from the beginning. You know, this guy is as evil as it gets.
It's wonderful because we're not starting at the beginning of a war here. We're starting in the middle and what many people think is the end of a war.
Right.
That's when this game starts.
Yes.
It's the end of a war. The people are sick of fighting. The people of Highland, everyone wants this war to be over, and that's why Luca Blight has lost popular support for his war. But he doesn't want to stop fighting.
No.
But he's lost the support of his people. And so he needs to do something. He needs a casus belli. He needs a reason to continue the fighting. And murdering kids it is, right? He doesn't care. And this is a great intro to his character as well. You get the captain of the child brigade, who is Riou, who doesn't like... It's so funny. He's very ambitious, but he keeps getting stuck in the... Like, he's basically a babysitter of these children, like the Boy Scouts.
Yes.
You know? They're legit fighters, right?
Yeah.
They're trained fighters, but they're still just children. And he doesn't like that. He wants to go be a top general one day. So he's more than happy to be rid of these pesky children so that he can climb up the hierarchy and get to that top spot that he's looking for. And Luca Blight, of course, teams up with him and says, all right, man, here's how we're going to do it. Going to murder your whole unit, and we'll keep fighting, and you're going to get all the war funding, and you're going to be a general. So they all die, but we get this intro to Luca in general, which is like he just doesn't care. And everyone knows that he's the instigator of it, but he has so much power. He's consolidated so much power, and with this event happening, this is like we've compared, this to other events in the past, something like Pearl Harbor or 9/11. Something horrific happens, too close to home for the citizens to be comfortable with. Whoever the leader is at that time becomes elevated. You will do whatever you want now. Congress all of a sudden forgets the partisan problems and vote 99-1 on the Patriot Act or something like that. And all of a sudden, everyone just kind of comes together, brings everyone together. And Luca is about to wield that kind of power, which is like, you think my power's waning, but after this, I'm going to be even more powerful, and my people will love me, right? It's like, it's just wild. It's wild to think about that. So that is who that character is.
So on top of setting up Luca as this horrendous person that must be stopped at any cost, our two characters who are loyal to their home country are separated in that event. They jump off a cliff in desperation, and Riou, our hero, our main character, is captured and taken by the enemy, but learns that his home country is actually the one that should be resisted and fought.
Yep.
And that's a hard revelation. And I feel like there are probably a lot of people out there who it's not exactly the same situation, but you learn about your country. Maybe you grew up in a patriotic kind of family.
Course.
You learn about all the stuff that your country has done in the past that you are not proud of, and you have very conflicted feelings about that. But even outside of that, even outside of, government, whether it's maybe a religion you grew up in or a certain set of moral values that you come into conflict with at a certain point of your life, it's a very relatable thing. And both of these characters find themselves in that position, and they have to make a choice about, well, what do we do about it?
Right.
Do we join our enemies, or do we try to fix the homeland in the ways that we know how to do?
And it's funny to see that both of these options kind of get realized within the different characters. Riou really kind of distances himself, and Jowy kind of tries to find his way back in.
He's going to, at any cost, in a very consequentialist way, at any cost, I'm going to fix Highland.
And I think the way that Jowy sees it, Luca is the problem.
Yes.
The people are good, the soldiers are good, all this killing is because of one guy, and he has a way that he can kind of, from the inside, depose that man from power, get him out of the picture, right? And once that happens, then there is no reason to hate Highland. But the way that the outside sees it is, it wasn't him who burned down my town. It was all of your soldiers and your brothers and sisters and your family and friends. They're the ones who burned down my place. Why would they listen to your stupid leader in the first place? And of course, Riou is saying, like, look, it was more than just that one guy. Often you just are blind to the other things around you, right? The other parts of your culture that you are part of because it's just how you were raised, right? That you don't realize that there's other deeper problems here.
I think the thing that I really like about Jowy's path in this story, where, like you said, if I can just take down Luca, it's all going to be okay. What he has to come to terms with at the end is that the steps he had to take and the sacrifices he had to make to get in the position to even do that meant sacrificing a lot of his humanity, a lot of his goodness, a lot of his innocence. Yeah. But it was all for the greater good in the end. It's any means justifies this end.
Right. And he's not totally wrong.
To a certain extent, when you have an extreme of that kind, the worst villain you can imagine, there's almost a part of you that can justify basically anything to get to a point where you can end that threat.
Right.
But when you take a step back from that and you realize, I'm not going to sacrifice all my morals on the step ladder to get to that point just because the ends justify the means, you realize, no, you ended up becoming something of a villain yourself along the way. Yeah. You lost yourself. And the moment Jowy chooses to leave.
That was I did not see that coming. Yeah. I didn't. I did see the rivalry budding. I saw that from the very first scene. But what he did in Muse, I was quite shocked. And of course, it all makes sense in time. By doing things like that, he has to become like Luca Blight in order to kill Luca Blight.
Yes.
And the only reason why I would say, well, Joey's got a point, and I actually think his strategy maybe could have worked, is because I like Jowy.
Yes, that's a good point.
That's it.
That's actually a really good point.
I feel like I know him. And I'm like, you know what? He's going to make mistakes. He's going to do wrong things. He did wrong things, but here he is now, and it's 1,000 times better than Luca Blight, and he's going to be a good leader now. I really think that, especially if he can see Pilica every now and then and just kind of make sure that his heart is still warm.
There's some part of it still in there. It's not totally rock solid at this point.
Then he could actually be in this world. I feel like he could have been a good leader. Whereas were anyone else to take out Luca Blight that I didn't feel like I had a connection to, I'd have been like, nah, they're just as bad. Screw him and kill him. But because it's Jowy, I'm like, Riou, maybe Jowy can pull this off, And we didn't, we don't really give him a chance to, but he could have maybe. I still feel like he was a good guy.
I want to talk really quickly about Luca Blight's death. This is one of the greatest scenes in the history of games to me. It is such a build-up to it because he's just so awful. And there's so many scenes where they reinforce that. And he's also so strong. Yeah. He's so powerful. Right. And this battle is so layered. There's one of the larger scale battles. Yeah, and then you go into like actually leading up to running up to him and actually fighting him. And there's stages to that. And he just gets backed into a corner all the way to the end.
That psychotic face begins to like become more prescient there, where it's like He's a snake with his head cut off, right?
Yes.
But he can still bite.
And it's like all those arrows and just like everyone coming together. It's like the whole freaking nation had to unite to kill
this
Luca.
one guy.
And finally he goes down, and there's just such relief in that moment.
And it's not even the whole nation, because the reason why we were able to outmaneuver him in the battle is because Jowy helped us from the inside.
Yes.
And so it's both nations.
Yes.
Like the might of both nations could barely really even finish the job in the end. Oh, it's crazy.
It's so well executed. The music is so phenomenal. It feels like it's just ramping up, and the stakes are getting higher and higher and higher. And then when you finally land that final blow and he falls down and it's finally over, it's just like, oh my goodness. Whew.
Yeah.
It's over. So in short, to kind of recap, the story of Suikoden II is amazing. It has incredible characters that you really feel bonded to. It's tragic to kind of see a lot of the hardships they pass through and the different paths that the best friends take in the game. But I love that format for a story. It's one of my favorite formats, I guess, for this kind of RPG. And if you haven't played it, I think you really should give it a shot.
As somebody who is new to this franchise, I cannot recommend this game enough. It's almost a perfect remaster that captures so much of the charm of that PS1 era of games, but just repackages it up in this modern way that is more accessible. There's not a lot of RPGs of this type really still being made today. Sometimes the best you can hope for is remasters of old games, and this is one that you just don't want to miss.